What is one lie you must keep up that you hate, but it covers up a much bigger f*** up? Story 1. That I can't smell anything. I told my best friend that in 3rd grade to sound cool. The problem is that he has a photographic memory. I'm trained to never make a comment about smells. My parents even think I can't smell. They paid for a doctor to look at it. The doctor said, "Oh, sometimes this happens, it's probably nothing to worry about." Worst doctor ever. I can't get out of it. Ever. I'm stuck. Story 2. I once worked at a large store and walked up to a co-worker to ask a question. I must have startled her because as I was asking, I noticed a weird look on her face and suddenly realized that she was peeing herself. I pretended not to notice, made some excuse to leave, and came back a little later to see her mopping it up. I said, "Did a customer spill another drink again?" and wandered off. I told all my co-workers that a customer had spilled soda all over the floor in her department. Story 3. Why don't you travel? Or even just go down to the USA for a day trip? Gas is cheaper down there, blah blah. I live in Canada, just on the other side of the border. I have to make all kinds of excuses like trying to save money by not going on vacations, not having a passport yet, having prior obligations, plans, and stuff like that. The real reason I've got a criminal record. Story 4. I work as a bar manager and both my boss and I are military vets. Actually, that's mostly how I got the job. We struck up a conversation and I discussed my time in the service. Except that my 6-year enlistment ended at around 3 years and 2 months. I didn't go AWOL UA or drink myself stupidly. Mostly I would oversleep and I was a mess up in my early 20s. Not my finest hour. I left with a general discharge, so I still had college paid for in Texas, but very few know about this. I couldn't reveal this, and honestly, the lie has manifested into the status quo. Everything I have has been predicated upon a lie. My jobs, my girlfriend, who's a veteran, and even a good amount of friends have no clue. Story 5. When I was a kid, I chased my little brother outside with a spoon. Once we got outside, he got on top of our car and started yelling. No clue why I was chasing him with a spoon or why I cared about him yelling. After he wouldn't get down, I threw the spoon at him, aiming for his stomach. Trying to avoid it, he ducked and it hit him in the face right next to his left eye. After he calmed down, I took him back into the house and told my mum he fell. He was hurt pretty bad. The spoon didn't just barely hit him. It caused permanent damage to that eye that he had to deal with for years. He wasn't blinded or anything, but his vision was impaired. He was too young to remember, I'm 3 years older than him, that it was my fault so he didn't know it was me. Not the biggest lie ever, because we were both kids and I didn't do it on purpose, but it's still pretty crap to know that I did that to someone. Story 6. Took the blame for my girlfriend's very public, very loud satanic fart. My girlfriend and I were sitting around visiting with a bunch of friends. She was sitting on my lap and someone else was talking, so no one was looking at us. All of a sudden, I felt my girlfriend seize up as she stifled a sneeze. Unfortunately, holding back the sneeze caused her to rip a massive fart. The fart was so huge that every head in the room turned towards us with a look of shock and awe on their faces. I just smiled sheepishly and said, "Excuse me." All the guys cracked up, and the girls feigned disgust until the aroma hit their nostrils. It was a rancid, vulgar odor that cleared everyone out of the room. The group had a few good laughs and made fun of me for years for that fart. That's okay. That night, and many nights thereafter, I was amply rewarded for chivalry. Story 7. Took the blame for clogging the toilet at my parents' house, when, in fact, it was my husband's poops that did it. To add insult to injury, they didn't have a plunger, and my stepmom used her yardstick to chop up the poop so that the toilet would flush. My husband and I were spending a few days with my dad and stepmom at their house, and we were hanging out downstairs when I went upstairs to change clothes. My husband runs up a few minutes later to use the bathroom. Since he is in the guest bathroom, I use the one in the master bedroom. When I come out, my husband is standing in the doorway of the guest room, silently and frantically motioning for me to come over. When I get in the room, he says, "Dude, I clogged the toilet and it won't flush. You have got to find a plunger." So I'm looking around upstairs but can't locate one. I tell him I'll have to go down and ask my dad where they keep it, and he begs me to take the blame to save him the embarrassment of clogging my parents' toilet with his massive poops. When I ask my dad where the plunger is, he gives me a weird look, and I tell him that I accidentally clogged the toilet. He and my stepmom go on a scavenger hunt for one, but come up empty-handed. My stepmom is like, "I don't think we have a plunger." What the hell? Who doesn't keep a plunger for those unexpected moments? Great. Now what? My husband is still hiding in the guest bedroom. Since no plunger can be located, my stepmom gets a yardstick from her craft room and proceeds to the bathroom to unclog the toilet. She chops my husband's poop into enough tiny pieces to flush the toilet with a yardstick, giving me looks. Dad too. My husband emerges from the master bathroom, toilet flushing in the background. What's going on? I told him I clogged the toilet and he started laughing, and my parents started teasing me, making poop jokes and talking about how they're going to have to get my stepmom a new yardstick because I destroyed the one she had. Yeah, my husband still owes me for that one. We laugh about it to this day, and my parents still bring it up, in public. Story 8. My roommate and I knew a younger guy, about 18, had some major drug and alcohol problems. He was staying with us for a week to try and get clean since he lived about 3 hours away. One morning, I come into the living room and we're watching TV when he says, I think my roommate came in here last night and grabbed my dick. I think he molested me. I stare blankly and remind him that roommate had been in a different state of business for the past 2 days. He says nothing but mutters under his breath. I know he was planning on trying to blackmail and besmirch my roommate's good name, but forgot that detail because of his addled brain. He never got the chance. He went back to his home 2 days later and was in a serious car accident. He and his girlfriend were both drunk and neither of them remembered who was driving, her because she was drunk, and him because he sustained massive head trauma and can't function properly. Can't talk, can't walk, can't use the bathroom, etc. If it weren't for his blinking and guttural moans, he'd be a complete vegetable. Here's the worst part. The part that pertains to this post. I never told anyone what he had said or what I knew he was planning. He was a piece of crap that was going to take advantage of my roommate, who is the best guy I know. After the wreck, my roommate was crushed. He thought he could have done more to keep the guy safe, and he did everything he could for the guy and his family afterward. He doesn't know what the low-life scum was going to do, and God help me, he never will. Story 9. I have 3. Each one was the worst in its own way. The day my father was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, I cried. I'm not a crier or a very emotional person. I'm more Vulcan, I guess. Not saying I'm a hard ass, just that I'm good at keeping up appearances. That caused me to lose it. That's the impact it had on me. The worst lie I maintained was that there was any improvement, or ever going to be any improvement, no matter what medicine he took. My parents were both hopeful. My family was hopeful. People prayed left and right, and every good day was met with praise Jesus. And maybe it isn't Lou Gehrig's after all. They basically forced me to say maybe they were right plenty of times. I didn't want to tell them the truth. He isn't going to get better. He's going to become more paralyzed until he can't get enough oxygen. Then he's going to die. Even the day he went out for a hospice weekend, my mum and I were his only caregivers 24/7 for years. I wanted to pull my mum to the side and say, this is CO2 poisoning. He can't breathe out enough and it's building up in his system. Say your goodbyes, his time is short. I recognized his change in behavior. I recognized his symptoms. Even the nurse at the hospice place wouldn't have any of it. I could barely open my mouth. Well, he died that day, just like I knew they would. And I couldn't very well go and tell him goodbye. I did the best I could without alerting him to the possibility of it. There are 2 lies, I guess. The third lie is that I hated to see him go. No, I loved to see him go. I didn't cry when he died. His suffering was finally over. Almost every minute of his last 6 months were hell for him. He could barely move anything at all. I mourned when he was still alive, but not enough people in my life would understand that for me to ever tell anyone I knew in real life. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I've never told anyone this and don't suspect I ever will again. Story 10. When I was 15 and only had a driver's permit, I fell asleep behind the wheel and rolled the truck I was driving. My mum was asleep on the passenger side and luckily we were not injured. She ended up telling the cops it was her driving, since it would have been impossible to ensure when and if I did get my license at 16 years old. It's not really a story that comes up often, but I have always felt terrible that it went on her driving record. Ever since that accident, I've made it a point to be a safe driver, and 8 years later have not been in another car wreck, knock on wood. Story 11. I came up with a lie so I wouldn't have to go to my sister's friend's surprise party. I told her I had some homework to finish up that was due that night. There was no assignment. I just didn't feel like going. My sister came over and said I should at least sign the card. My sister then very strongly suggested that her friend really likes me. So now I do want to go, but I already told the lie. So now I backtrack saying that the assignment was almost done and I could turn it in now for a 90. I went to the party. We hooked up 3 days later and I'm still dating her. The annoying part is whenever anyone tells the story of how we got together. They say that I got a lower grade on an assignment so I could see her. I really want to correct it, but there is no graceful way I can think of to do so. Story 12. I worked at my dad's company when I graduated from college. I spent 2 years there. I tell people that I quit because it was essentially a dead end for me, and that I needed to move on. And while that was true, that wasn't why I quit. I texted a bunch of people an inappropriate message as a joke, one of whom was a co-worker of mine. She told our supervisor and said she now wasn't sure she felt comfortable working around me. The supervisor could tell that it was a joke and a misunderstanding on the co-worker's part, but we both agreed that I was out of line. My dad found out later that day. The next day I went in and gave my 2 weeks' notice. I said that any action not resulting in my leaving could potentially be construed as favoritism, and I didn't want to risk my father's position, and thus my brother's tuition and mother's alimony, on a silly mistake at a job I had outgrown. The only people that know what really happened are my co-worker, my supervisor, her supervisor, and my dad. Everyone else thinks I just got sick of the job and left. Story 13. My dad told me on my 19th birthday that he had fathered a girl with another woman. He never mentioned that he was currently playing a role in the kid's life, and I never asked. He had never told my older brother and sister, but my mother knew. They were going to tell us all at one point, but he died before that ever happened. It was 7 years later. I act like I don't know about it. My sister somehow found out about it and was hinting about it at a family function, but never actually said anything. It gives me some small measure of satisfaction that I knew something this big before my big nosy crap of a sister did. If she brought it up, I was fully prepared to not give crap and just carry on. It hasn't changed my life in any way, really. I've never had any intention of meeting my half-sister and probably give as much of a crap about them as they do about me, maybe less. Dropping that I know about it to my mother would probably cause her a considerable amount of grief at having to deal with it again. Not worth it. Story 14. I guess this lie wasn't made by me, but I keep it going because I'm too afraid to tell anyone the real truth. I was always a good football player, starting center on a pretty storied high school team. In my junior year, we got a new offensive line coach, and he was a very terrible man. I think he was taking out his hatred for his sons on us guys. He made us do a lot of terrible things, including doing bear crawls through a horse trough filled with about 6 inches of poop. I've been through the typical hazing in sports, but this was borderline abuse. I quit the team a week before our first game and gave no explanation for why. No one would believe anything I said about the coach anyways. I lost all the men in my life I had come to know as father figures, and many people I had called friends. About a year later, I found out that the coach's wife had started a rumor that I was a drug addict who chose addiction over sports. I let the lie go and choose never to explain the real reason. Whenever I see the coaches or players around town, they can't even look me in the eyes. My last 2 years in high school were the worst in my entire life, and I've been depressed ever since. This was 4 years ago. I know this doesn't really follow the thread exactly, and will probably get lost, but it is a lie I choose to keep up, for whatever reason. Story 15. I dropped out of a private high school and moved to SoCal to pursue other goals in life. Needless to say, without even a diploma, I was not going to get anywhere. So I started to research and build a resume and portfolio based on my interests. I ended up meticulously building a faux life that everyone I was around started to believe. I told my family in another state that I had got my GED, passed 2 years at a community college, and then attended a 4-year university and graduated with a degree in history. This wasn't all at once. I let them know what I was doing as I was doing it. It all went so smoothly. I then got a job at a museum as an event coordinator and make $56,000 a year. I have no high school diploma, no college education, nothing. All I have are excellent work references. The jobs I did get I made sure I did well, and apparently that was enough for them to hire me at my current job. I am attractive and well-spoken, professional in appearance, and actually very intelligent. I was always afraid that they would check my school references, but so far it's never been brought up. Apparently work references and experience mean a great deal more than where you went to school these days. And if you have glowing references, you are pretty much set. Sometimes it gets stressful, and I find myself bothered by it at night. I can't tell anybody that I get into a relationship with who I really am. Even my family thinks I am somebody I am not. Nobody knows. Nobody. It gets very lonely sometimes. Story 16. I used to serve at a major chain restaurant. When I messed up or forgot to bring something to a table, it was never my fault. I'd blame the kitchen, the bartender, the busboy, anything but admit I made a mistake. So this particular night, I sat on a three-top consisting of 2 adults and a boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The parents order their drinks and ask for kid-sized milk for their son. I bring them an adult-sized milk by mistake, and the dad says, "Oh, excuse me, but we wanted a kid-sized milk." I lie, "Yeah, we're actually all out of kid cups, so that's all we have. I'm sorry, my manager forgot to place the order for them this week." He believes my story and everything is fine, but then I get sat on an 8-top with 4 kids and 4 adults. I'm forced to carry on this charade to the next table, being out of kid cups, because they're in plain sight of the 3-top, and the next table, and the next. Story 17. My wife and I were at my parents' house helping them organize things in the attic. My wife slipped at one point and stepped right through the bedroom ceiling. I picked her back up and I could hear my parents yelling, "What was that? What happened?" She started crying because she was always trying to impress my parents, so I yelled, "I stepped through the ceiling, sorry," and took the blame. Years later, my family still makes fun of me for the incident. I just look over at my wife and wink. Story 18. I'm fine. I'm not fine. I'm a crazy, introverted, lazy bugger who long ago decided it would be easier to coast along with life and forget all thoughts of what I want in order to make it easier because life was crappy. Now that I'm on my own, I realize that I have no idea what I want. I have no great passion for life, and I occasionally see no reason to wake up every day. I don't talk to my friends, I don't plan amazing adventures, and I don't do anything particularly noteworthy. I strongly suspect I have a legitimate mental problem, but I don't care enough to go and find out. I do not in fact care about much of anything. This worries me deeply. So now I'm surreptitiously trying to find ways to get myself interested in anything at all, as well as forcing myself to be more social while fighting the calm little buzz in the back of my brain that tells me to sleep. However, I can't very well tell this to any of my family members because half of them are in the same damn boat. One's paranoid and depressed, another's bipolar. One was really ambitious but is now entering a state of apathy. And if I mention it to any of them, it would be just one more of a monumental pile of crap they have to worry about. So whenever someone comes up to me, I simply say, "I'm fine," because it's a lot easier on everybody else. I suppose one weird side effect of this is that I am apparently a funny person. Apparently talking about all the shit that depresses you in an upbeat tone is hilarious. This explains so much about stand-up comedy. Story 19. Found out I was pregnant after hooking up with someone who was more or less a stranger. I forced myself to starve and purge myself so that my body was physically incapable of nurturing an unborn child. Never told anyone. Decided to make a throwaway for this. This is less of a lie as it is an omission of the truth, but it's still relevant and still kicked me to cover it up. I was in San Francisco for a couple of weeks the summer before my senior year of high school. My parents had let me go on this trip knowing that I would be close to some close family friends. But in all honesty, I spent the whole time just kicking it with one of my closest girlfriends. I had the time of my life and I don't regret a single second there. But I did hook up with a guy several times. Each time we were pretty drunk. I'm confident we used protection. In fact, I'm 110% sure we did. Anyways, I went back home, but still kept in touch with this guy and my other friends back in San Francisco. But I started feeling sick a few weeks later. My senior year was starting, and I couldn't get the nagging thought out of my mind that maybe, just maybe I was pregnant. I didn't want to be, but I didn't rule out the possibility. So I went down to the drugstore, bought a few tests and tried 1, 2, 3, and all came back with the same result. I was, without a doubt, pregnant. Now, during this time, I was still really ill. I'm still preoccupied with my habits of anorexia and bulimia, and no way could I be pregnant because I was too young. I was about to go through my senior year of high school, and I would probably gain so much weight. Understand that I was really, really ill, and as messed up as those reasons sound, it was exactly what was going through my mind. So for the next 2 weeks, I restricted my meals so much that I was consuming under 300 calories a day. I exercised enough to burn off all those calories and then some. And whatever I did eat, I always followed up with a bottle cap-sized portion of ipecac, a liquid that induces vomiting. Most of that time is a blur, just like most of the years when I was ill. But I do remember that after those 2 weeks, I took a few more tests, and I wasn't pregnant anymore. I try not to think too hard about what happened because the idea that I was totally comfortable with this just a few years ago terrifies me to no end. I never told the guy I hooked up with that I was pregnant. I never told him about the decisions I made. I never even made him know of an option. I got rid of a problem quietly because I was scared and too young to have a kid of my own. I haven't told anyone I've dated, or actually anyone I know, since then. I keep it because it wouldn't benefit anyone by knowing what the truth is now. I still feel terrible about it and probably always will. Story 20. My mom didn't actually die of cancer. She died of HIV, and I'm the only one of 5 kids, and my aunts, that know the actual truth. I keep telling my sister it's not a good idea to get a cancer ribbon tattoo, but she doesn't get why.